Good morning, everyone. Russ St. Cyr here, University Pastor for Service and Soul Care, here with this Monday morning devotional thoughts for you this week of October 30th, National Candy Corn Day. Blech. More importantly, it's just my favorite month. It's my favorite time of the year. It's harvest. It's my birthday month. It's Halloween. We get dressed up. That's all funny and fun. It's more importantly, it's college football season. That's a pretty big deal. But candy and costumes are pretty fun, especially after having kids. Candy and costumes are pretty interesting. My favorite family costuming opportunity we had as a family so far has been we were Fantastic Mr. Fox's family a while back. But anyway, I am predicting this year expect to see a sea of Barbies and Kens on the streets during this week for candy and costumes everywhere you go. Costumes and candy, they're really fun, but they're also kind of tricky. They're, especially if you're thinking about it the way Carl Jung might have talked about it a lot when he talks about personas and all these things, and how our masks and our costumes, how much they tell us about what we're really trying to protect deep down. I get to thinking about that quite a bit when I meet with students regularly for soul care, spiritual direction. When I'm doing my own kind of work around that stuff, I'm really fascinated by how our candy shell is protective and her persona in public is protective. It made me think of something one of my favorite seminary professors once told us or gave us this analogy with one of my favorite candies. She liked to liken us in our Imago Dei, our belovedness, our made in God's created image, that nugget of us that's inside of us. She likened that to the peanut, the only thing with any kind of nutritional value inside the peanut M&M. And then she describes the dark chocolate on top of that peanut as the things that we're kind of like that are in the shadows, that the dark side of that we don't want to be exposed to light. We don't want it to make a mess in our lives with. And so because of that dark chocolate inside, we candy shell the outside. So we have a protective candy coating on the outside. That's always stuck with me because it gives us some insight onto sometimes what behaviors, where they come from, and what motivates us. It brings me to the thoughts today in Luke chapter 16, where Jesus is really being recorded here in Luke's gospel as starting to hammer it home, especially around the way we use money and the way that we use power and those kinds of things, especially for our persona's use and not for the kingdom of God. And he has this really interesting story about a shrewd manager, followed by these words to the Pharisees of his day, which were the powerful, influential religious group of his day. And he says this to them in Luke chapter 16, starting verse 10. He's saying this: whoever is faithful in a very little is faithful also in much. And whoever is dishonest in a very little is dishonest also in much. It goes on to say later, no one can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, and be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. The Pharisees, who were lovers of money, heard all this, and they ridiculed him. So he said to them, you are those who justify yourselves in the sight of others. Basically saying, your persona is you look really justified in the sight of others, but God knows your heart. I think that's a great caution from Jesus to all of us who are wanting to be right with God. I think the Pharisees were probably wanting to be right with God, hopefully at some point, but they got a reputation in the Gospels of being a group whose candy shell really got in the way of the integrity of their wanting to be just and right with God over time. And then, like it said in Jesus' own words, they became lovers of money, and Jesus really challenged them that money, this temporary thing we use and we can use for God's glory, can also become a dangerous thing. Just like the way we mask up and costume up in our lives sometimes when the exterior does not match what's going on in the heart, as Jesus said to the Pharisees in that moment. So I would like to invite you into a spiritual practice that might help you break that candy shell and let the peanut of the peanut M&M shine in this world, the imago Dei of you shine. And this practice is this. It's the spiritual discipline of confession. Now, some of you who may have not grown up in Catholic circles or other circles that regularly practice that, you might think, oh, confession. Oh man, I gotta have an accountability partner. Okay. Or you might be thinking, what is confession? I don't even know what that is. I want to frame it to you as this. Confession is a means of grace from God to help us grow toward integrity. Where the inside matches the outside kind of thing. Where there can be shalom or wholeness inside and out. Because to God, as it appears in Jesus' own words, wholeness beats out hypocrisy. We want wholeness. We want someone to be healed by God and growing from the inside out rather than to be putting on a persona and protecting ourselves from those vulnerabilities that we worry might get in the way. And in the end, those protective shells can take over our lives and we can't serve God and money, or we can't serve God and our pursuit of power in other kinds of ways. So if you have any opportunity, whether to meet with one of us in spiritual life, a pastoral meeting, or a friend who's further along the spiritual journey than you, or you have a peer group or a recovery group or a 12-step group, any kind of setting where you can just break open the candy shell and be real and not be judged about it, a non-judgmental space where everybody's in it together, that is one of the coolest and most deepening experiences I've had as a person on a spiritual journey trying to grow towards Christ. To allow for this shadow work of what's dark and scary, maybe messy in my life, to be available for God's healing and wholeness. And the only way that can happen is like what the scriptures invite us to, is to confess one to another your sin, confess your real selves of what's going on inside you one to another. And so I invite you to that sometime, maybe this month. Pursue a life group or a small group, or come see us in the Spiritual Life office. Not just knock on the door, hey, I need to come confess my sins to a priest or something, unless you really want to do that. But to come and seek us out, and maybe we can start talking about what does it mean to be authentic before God in prayer and authentic before God in our communities, so that we don't fall into these traps of our persona, and that we can serve God and not be spread thin serving some other idol or some other master that tries to take over our lives. I leave that with you this time in this month, as maybe as you see the costumes and the candy come out this week, you might think, oh yeah, I wonder how I might practice confession as a way of freeing me up to be my real God-given self in this world, and to not be tempted to be candy shelled up with some kind of persona that can take over. God bless you in that endeavor. Come seek us out if you need help with that, or you'd like to talk more about that. Take care, and God bless you.